Hi YouTube, welcome back to Wtf Rc Cars. So we completed step 29 last time, so we're starting at 30, which is fitting the electronics, servo and the rest of the odd little bits we need to finish this. Hopefully we'll get it all done in this video. So let's bring you in for a close-up look of the TA-08 Pro and see if we can get this thing finished for you. Right, so what we're going to need is the Q4, the Q5. You're going to need the servo arm that fits your servo. So this is the Futaba Tamiya one. So this will be the one that fits the 25 tooth spline. You're going to need your little ball joint, the 8mm screw for that, and a 10mm screw that fits your servo. We've got as 3 spring rings, but we're going to need as receiver, and we're going to need a transmitter, a servo, and something to power them with, because we need to center a servo. So first thing I'm going to do is get us transmitter on. So let's get us focused on that. So I'm going to go into model memory. I'm going to make sure I've picked a blank model memory just to make sure. I'm going to reset it. Then we've got to give it channel number definition, so we're going for 4 channel. So once we've done that, we can give it a name. So this one is going to be the TA Pro. So we've got that set up. Radio frequency we're going to use 2-way. So we can come out of that. Then we want to go into our receiver menu. And I always suggest doing this. So we're going to have to put the receiver in bind mode. So it's across channel 4 and bind. And then you can power it up. And then we can go update receiver and FGR4S. So it'll then look for the receiver, update the firmware on it. I always do this because I'm never sure how long I've had these not in use. So then we can back out. We can power it off. Pop your pin into the bind position and then just power it. Then we go bind set, classic, start bind. So once we've got that bound, just need to make sure all your endpoints and everything are zeroed, which it should be if you've reset the model memory. Make sure your sub trims are all zeroed. Then we can power off. We can get our steering servo. And we're going to pop that into channel 1. And then we just need to power it back up. To make sure it's centered. Power it all off.
Signal lost. Shutting down.
And then we can put his transmitter to one side because we're not going to need that for a while. Get rid of his battery. So we start with the servo in the correct orientation. So they're going to want it that way. Then we're going to want to get our servo horn and get it as central as we can. So once we've got that on, we're then going to want the first spring. The second one is usually a bit of a pain on these, but that's not too bad. Then we can get his third ring. So we've got all them on. So once you've got all your rings in place, then we can pop the top one on. You can drop the plate on. We can get a screw ready. Once you got it all screwed down, then you want to get the screw, bring that through from the back. We're just quickly going to tighten that up. So that should be what you're looking at. You want it as central as possible, but once you've got it screwed down, don't matter where you move it to, because we know that it's as close to centre as it's going to be. So let's move on and see what else we've got. So moving on, we have our servo mount. This is T8, so it's asking us to mount the servo to the back of this. So to mount this, we're going to need 4 of the little washers and then 4 of the MB1 8mm screws. And these do seem to fit well with this servo. So we're using a 9 Imod. It's one of the 25 kg servos, but it's not asking us to fit any rubber sort of dampers or anything on this. So you just need to make sure you've got all 4 of these screwed in fairly tight. Just don't go too mad because it is only into plastic and they're quite fine thread. So once we've got that into position, you're then going to need the RC back. So for this, we're going to be mounting it down on the 3 holes that run near the belt, which is why it's chamfered. So we're going to have to get that into position. And I certainly think, looking at that, we're going to need to put some shims on this servo to bring it back, because the top is stuck out too far. So if you've got a servo that's quite deep and sticks out at top, you're definitely going to have to drop it back, else it's going to be hitting the steering rack. So let's see if we've got some shims. Right, so for this one, I've ended up needing 2.5mm of shims either side. You don't quite have to get it flush, but pretty close. So once we've done that, we can get it in, make sure steering's nice and free. So then we want to clip our steering on. Then you're going to need 3 of the MA4 screws. So we'll flip this over, and I believe these should all be hex heads. So then we're going to drop these in. So because these are a little bit awkward to get in, I'd get all 3 in first before you start tightening them down. And we can just make sure the steering moves freely still. It is very close, but it just doesn't quite catch. Quite a lot of flex in that though for a servo mount. Not sure if it's all in the mount. It looks like it's in chassis. Weight chassis is flexing. Not sure how much that's going to affect the steering, but bit of a chore, but we've actually got that fitted. So next, moving on, we're going to need 2 of the MB3 really short X screws. And then this is where we're going to fit as motor cover, or as spur cover should I say. So if you get 2 in from the back, you should have 1 hole open in the left open in the centre. I'm not sure if it's really needed this. Because it's certainly going to make lining your pinion spur up a bit more difficult. But it's asking us to fit it, so there we go. Right, next we're going to be moving on to fitting the ESC and as receiver. So looks like it's asking us to fit everything here, but there's really not a lot of room there. And we do get the small A1 plate, that you fit your wiring in, apparently. So this bit's going to be interesting, because there's not many ESCs that'll fit in that. But luckily we have got a very small receiver, so at least as receiver's not going to take up much room. But let's see how we get on with it. So purely in the interest of trying to keep this somewhere vaguely neat, so I'm going to try and get the speed controller as close in and as close to the motor mount as I can. And for the speed controller, the ESC, the only ones that we're allowed to use at the track where I race this at is the Hobbywing 1060s. Then I'm going to drop my receiver in, and I really don't like having the receiver that close to the servo and the ESC, but in this build there's not much you can do about it. Next thing, we're going to have to plug these in, so at least I can still get to the plugs this way and I can see which way they go. So we're using the FLYSKY FGR4S receiver. So I'll get that in. Then I just need the rest of wires put in on the motor for the speed controller. So let's go and grab them. So I've just stuck the wires on, not sure which way around these are going to need to go. But the reason that I'm tending not to solder these to the actual motor is because if we burn a motor out at the track, it's a bit of a pain to start messing about unsoldering. So it's nice to have the bullet connectors on. So I'm just going to tidy this wiring up. I decided not to use the two A1 parts because it just wouldn't fit, and basically I don't want my cables tied up in this and then having to remove everything just to swap a failed servo or failed ESC out. So let's get these tidied up. So there we have it. We've got our motor all connected. We've got as ESC, as receiver and a servo. We've got a little power switch on side, and I've got the ESC set in forward and brake only mode and set to LiPo. So we can clip this little zip tie. So that's got it looking relatively tidy. We shouldn't have any cables going into as belts. Looking at it, feel a little bit tight, the belts, but I have built it to how it says to build it, and I'll look at adjusting the tension and everything once we get everything in place. There is a bit of flex in chassis, but it does don't feel too bad. So let's move on, see what else we've got. Right, so it's telling us we need two BB2 parts, and then it's telling us we want the little cutouts facing rear. So these should just drop in. So then we're going to need to flip it over. This is certainly going to be a bit awkward. So what we're going to need is, we're going to need an MB1 screw, and then we're also going to need a washer. So we've got to somehow hold these in position. So this is definitely going to be somewhat what you're going to have to do with the RC on its side. So you have to get it in position and then carefully try and get your washer and everything into position to screw into the body mount. So a little bit awkward, but it does seem doable. See if I can get this one in place. So once you've got them two screwed in, it's then telling us to count up. So it looks like, well, 1, 2, 3, 4th hole up. And then you want your BB3 brace. And then you should have another body pin on each side on the top of this. Now of course, if that interferes with whatever body shell, you're going to be able to drop that down. So let's see what else we've got on this build. Right, so for this bit you're going to need B1, 2 B5s and 3 ME3s. So looks like the B5s should socket into what's the front bumper. Then we're going to have to flip the RC over. Then you want your long tapered head screws, if I can get them to stick in. So just need to quickly screw these down. And like with all of the fine threaded screws into plastic, I won't go too crazy with them. And I usually find it easier to get everything into place if you start 1 or 2 off and just screw them down and then tighten all 3 up. So once we've got them in, we can flip it back over. Then we should have 2 more ME3s. So these are your long tapered ones. Right, so looking at this, it's telling us to fit this part, and you want that face down. Then we've got to put one of these in each side with the little arrow facing forward. Or facing towards the RC, should I say. So once you've got them into place, you're going to have to try and lower them down, and they should lock into the actual bumper. So I think it's going to be easier if we get these top screws in first. It is asking us to use the forwardmost holes. At least doing it this way, when we flip the RC over, it shouldn't all fall apart. So all we need to do now is try and get these lined up with the actual sockets in the bumper. It doesn't seem too bad to line them up. Possibly famous last words, because it's only one that I've got lined up. But you can tell when they are straight because of the location of the holes on the body posts. So that's one. Let's see if it's going to be nice to us and line the second one up. So if we get the screw in, it should latch into place. It does feel like it has. That looks like it's made quite a nice sturdy bumper. And we've got the rear mounts on. So let's have a look what else we've got. Right, so moving on, we have the stock wheels. The tyres with the inserts that I'm using are the Kamtec A30s. So I've run these on most of my touring cars and all the Tamiya sort of touring cars, and they've worked quite well. So let's see what else we've got. So for the time being, I'm going to be using the stock hexes. We're not running a really hot motor, so it shouldn't really be an issue. So you're going to need to get these tiny little shims, and they just drop on to make sure that your hex is not running on the outer race of your bearing. Then we're going to need to get a drive pin. As you see, the shim keeps the drive pin where it should be. Then we're going to have to drop one of the hexes on. Then we're going to need one of his wheels and one of the really nice anodized wheel nuts. So we've got no binding or anything. Then again, we're going to want one of his tiny little shims. Then we're going to want another drive pin and one of his hexes. So again, we got no binding. Then we're just going to have to repeat the process on the front. And if I don't get any issues with the stock plastic hexes, so if we get no issues with these sort of breaking or anything, I don't really see any advantage to swapping for the aluminium ones. As I say, we're not running a lot of power, but it's definitely something you can do. It does add just a little bling to it, and seems that it's already sort of covered in aluminium blue anodized parts. Usually I run the sort of dish wheels, but I thought, seems though these wheels look quite nice, and I know the offset's going to be good, and then if we need a bit of extra offset, you can have a look, see how much of the actual drive cup you've got sticking through. But we have the car and we have it set up, so let's see what else we've got. So depending on what battery you're using, we need 2 of the A11 parts, 2 of the, I think these are A4, and you can use the M13 in the end of these to bring these out slightly, but I'm going to try building it without, because it does say that the stock setup is for a sort of standard size Tamiya pack, and that's pretty much what I've got. You do get the foam with it, so you can put the foam in down the side of these parts and on these little tags if it's needed, but I'm going to assemble it first and then see what sort of shape we have. So first off, we're going to need the MA3 screws and as 2 battery stays, and these are going to come through from the bottom, and both of these, so if you've got the back of the RC to your left, they both go on that way round. So let's see how well these fit. And these, like all the rest of it, are the 2mm hex. So that's one in. Now I'm not sure if you could flip these round to move weight slightly forward or back. Seems like they both face the same way, as long as it doesn't foul on anything. Should in theory be possible. So that's the way round it's telling us to put these stays as stock. So we need the ME2, which are the shorter screws. And we're going to use these to hold as battery stay together. And then if you need slightly wider packs, you can put the M13 spacer in, that'll bring this out. It is a quite nice way that they've designed this, because it does give you plenty of option for mounting your battery. So that gives us a battery container. Then we're going to need the slightly shorter, and I believe these are the A13 parts, and then I think it's the A12. Yeah, we're going to need the little A12 stubs. So it looks like it's telling us to put these in, and it looks like we're going for the hole closest to the outside on the front. I'll screw it all the way down to start, because we can always move it around later. Again, if your batteries are taller or shorter, you can just change the spacing. Now, to stay out of the way of the wires from the battery, it's telling us to go for the innermost hole on this side. So next we need to get a battery and fit it and see if we need to make any adjustments. So these are the two different packs that I race with. The Z tend to have slightly more punch than the Gens Ace, and they do tend to fit better in most of the RCs. So this seems to fit in really well. If we put the tiny bits of foam in, there'll be no play, and you can easily move the battery lockdowns over, and I think that'll fit really well. And we've just got as battery wire. I tend to twist them just to hold the balance lead, stop them flying around. So we're definitely going to be able to use the Z batteries in there quite easy. And the Gens Ace, I kind of wish they'd done these because they're so thick. If they'd done them central, seems to be a reoccurring issue with Gens batteries. They tend to bring the leads out on one side at lipos, which causes fitment issues with almost all RCs. So although the clip over at rear at battery to front at card, that does fit in really well, you're really struggling to get the lipo down. You can get it fastened in and we can use it, and there's no play, so the Gens will fit, but it's just going to be pushing on the rear of the battery case, which tends to be a recurring issue with the Gens batteries. I'm not sure why they're obsessed with putting either massively thick cables or just orientating them to one at corners. It just causes issues. But they do both packs still work, and they've been reliable in racing. So let's move on and see. We've very almost sort of got this finished. So let's see what else we need. So the next thing we're going to want to do is, before we set all this ride out and everything, we need to get a body shell that fits on this thing. So I'm going to use one of the dirt cheap ones that I've got from AliExpress, and this BMW one seems to fit the wheelbase correctly. The wheels seem to be sat pretty much where I'd want them, and quite importantly, the front bumper sits right behind the body shell. So the easiest way, I mean, these, I got a whole bunch of them for about £2.50 each. And I think it was dirt cheap shipping as well on an offer. They do come with holes already put in them and on the sides. Not sure what RC they were for, but they do fit the Tamiya cars really well. So we need to position this and get us holes. But the easiest way I've found of doing that is using the little magnetic hole clips or hole locators. So let's get them and see how we go about getting this fitted. Right, so with these things, we just drop them on, or drop one half of them on. Then you get your body into position, and then you just drop them on top and try and find your posts. Let's have a look where these are. A lot further forward than that. So you can move your body shell around on your RC now and see where they line up, and I just push them about a bit just to make sure they sat where they should be. And then when you're happy with them, I just find it a lot easier to just get a dot of paint and just put it straight through them. And then should be able to pop these off, and you should be left with the marks where you need to put your body shell holes. So let's get some holes put in this, and I'm also going to try and come up with a way of putting a wing on it or a spoiler. Right, so we've got a battery fitted, so let's get that connected. We're going to power up his transmitter, and then we can turn it on. So let's see if we got the wires in the right place. Does it go forward? It certainly does. And the steering is the right way, and these 9 Imod servos seem really well suited to the Tamiya cars. They're really quick, especially if you're only using a low powered BEC, and that's just set stock 100%, and the steering seems to be centered perfect, and it's turning perfect all the way to where I want it to. So now we've got it all built up, let's see what you think to the body shell. So I haven't played with the ride height or anything yet. I think that's about where I'm going to run it. The wing we've got fastened on back, and all I've done is put a few nuts and bolts straight through it. I've put a bit of tape on just to hold it to make sure I could get it in the right position. But I think what I'll do, I'll get you some shots of this so you can see round the actual RC, and then we'll wrap this one up. There we have it, the Tamiya TA-08 Pro, and really enjoyed the build so far. Hope it drives nice. I will put a link if I can find it to where I got these body shells from. Bought a whole bunch of them and they were like £2 odd each, which is an absolute bargain. I think the wing came with one of the other cheap body shells, but it was an offer they'd got on. But yeah, I do like it. The front of the body fits really close to the bumper, and it sits nice and low, and they're not too heavy, but it does feel nice and strong. They come already painted up, and it does seem to fit really well on the TA-08 Pro chassis. So hopefully it drives as well as it looks. But if you enjoyed this as much as I have, and you like the content, don't forget to like and subscribe, hit the notification bell, share to friends and family, and catch you guys again in the next one.